Welcome back, everyone, and if you're new here, I'm so glad you found the channel. We're on an exciting journey to reach 10k subscribers by next year, and every like, comment and subscription brings us one step closer. Your support means everything. Now, let's jump into today's video. The soft glow of computer monitors illuminated Dr. Evelyn Pierce's face as she stared at the data streaming across her screen. It was nearly midnight at the Solaris Observatory, and everyone else had long since gone home. Everyone except Evelyn. The quiet hum of the machinery around her had become more familiar than the sound of her own apartment. She preferred it this way, the solitude, the focus, the pure, uninterrupted communion with the cosmos. Evelyn pushed her glasses up the bridge of her nose and leaned closer to the screen. For the past 7 years, she had dedicated her life to studying solar phenomena, mapping out patterns in solar flares, radiation bursts and coronal mass ejections. The sun was her obsession, her passion, her life's work. At 38, she had already published more papers on solar dynamics than researchers twice her age, earning her both respect and resentment within the scientific community. The Solaris Observatory sat nestled in the mountains, far from city lights and electromagnetic interference. Its state-of-the-art solar telescopes peered into the heart of our nearest star. With unprecedented precision, most people saw the sun as merely a ball of fire in the sky, but Evelyn knew better. It was a complex dynamic entity, constantly churning with nuclear reactions and magnetic fields that danced in intricate patterns. Patterns that lately had begun to show something unusual. Her phone buzzed, breaking her concentration. It was a text from her sister, Ava. "Still at work? It's Friday night, Evelyn. Friday. Normal people have lives." Evelyn smiled faintly and typed back. "Important data coming in. Rain check on dinner." 3 dots appeared then. "You said that last week and the week before. The sun will still be there tomorrow, you know." But that was exactly what concerned Evelyn. Something about the sun wasn't quite right. "I promise to make it up to you," she texted back before setting her phone down. The relationship between the Pierce sisters had always been complicated. Where Evelyn was methodical, introverted, and analytical, Ava was spontaneous, outgoing, and intuitive. As a reporter for the local news station, Ava thrived on human connection, something Evelyn had never quite mastered. Their parents' early death had left them with only each other, but even that bond had been strained by Evelyn's increasing withdrawal into her work. A knock at the door startled her. Dr. Noah Campbell stood in the doorway, his tall frame silhouetted against the dim hallway light. "Still here, Evelyn? It's nearly midnight." His voice carried a note of concern rather than judgment. Noah was one of the few colleagues Evelyn genuinely liked. At 42, he had established himself as a leading solar physicist, but unlike many of their peers, he maintained a warmth and enthusiasm that reminded Evelyn why she had fallen in love with astronomy in the first place. "I'm tracking an anomaly in the solar core readings," she explained, gesturing to her screen. "It's subtle, but it's there. Look at these fluctuation patterns." Noah moved closer, peering over her shoulder at the data visualizations. His aftershave, something with sandalwood, momentarily distracted her. It was a pleasant reminder that there was a world outside these walls, one with scents and sensations beyond the sterile environment of the observatory. "That's unusual," he admitted, frowning at the screen. "But it could be a calibration issue. When was the last time we ran diagnostics on the heliospectrometer?" "Tuesday, and I ran them again this morning. The equipment is functioning perfectly." Evelyn pulled up another set of readings. "I've been tracking this for 3 weeks now. It's becoming more pronounced." Noah's expression grew serious. "What exactly do you think we're looking at?" Evelyn hesitated. Spoken aloud, her theory would sound absurd, even to someone as open-minded as Noah. "I think there's something inside the sun," she finally said. "Something that shouldn't be there." Noah's eyebrows rose. "Inside the sun, Evelyn, We're talking about a massive nuclear fusion reactor with temperatures exceeding 15 million degrees Celsius. Nothing could exist inside it. I know how it sounds, she said, frustration edging into her voice. But these readings, they suggest an object. Something dense and artificial. Artificial? Noah shook his head. That's impossible. So was a black hole until we found one. Evelyn turned back to her screen. I need more time with the data. Noah placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Evelyn, when was the last time you slept? Really slept? She brushed his concern away. I'm fine. This is important, Noah. So, is your health? His voice softened. Look, why don't you go home, get some rest, and we can look at this together tomorrow, with fresh eyes. Professor Ward will be here, and he might have some insights. Evelyn knew he was right, though she was reluctant to admit it. Professor Malcolm Ward, the director of the observatory, and her longtime mentor, had an uncanny ability to see patterns others missed. If anyone could help make sense of what she was seeing, it would be him. Fine, she conceded, saving her work. First thing tomorrow. As she drove home through the winding mountain roads, Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that she was on the verge of something monumental. The stars glittered overhead like distant sentinels, and the moon cast a pale glow over the landscape. But it was the sun, currently hidden beyond the horizon, that occupied her thoughts, our life-giving star, the center of our solar system harboring something unknown, something that, deep in her gut, she knew was not supposed to be there. Her apartment was cold and impersonal when she arrived, barely furnished, with stacks of research papers and books on astrophysics serving as the primary decoration. Ava often joked that it looked more like a graduate student's office than a home. Evelyn couldn't argue. She spent so little time here that investing in decor seemed pointless. Sleep came fitfully that night. In her dreams, Evelyn floated in the vacuum of space, tethered to nothing, drifting toward the immense, blazing surface of the sun. As she drew closer, the roiling plasma parted like a curtain, revealing a dark, churning void within. A void that seemed to watch her, to reach for her with tendrils of darkness amid the flames. She tried to scream, but in the silence of space, no sound emerged. Just as the darkness was about to envelop her, she jolted awake, gasping for breath, her nightshirt damp with sweat. The clock read 5:17 a.m. There would be no more sleep tonight. By 6:30, Evelyn was back at the observatory, her hair still damp from the shower, a large coffee clutched in her hand like a lifeline. The early morning light filtered through the large windows of the main research hall, casting long shadows across the polished floors. She was not surprised to find Professor Ward already there, hunched over a terminal, his silver hair wild, as if he had been running his hands through it all night. "You're early, Dr. Pierce," he remarked without looking up, somehow sensing her presence. At 55, Malcolm Ward retained the sharp intellect and curiosity that had made him a legend in the field of astrophysics. His methods were unorthodox, his lectures often veering into territories that bordered on the philosophical rather than the strictly scientific, but his results were undeniable. "I could say the same about you, Professor," Evelyn replied, setting her coffee down and taking a seat at her workstation. "The sun waits for no one," he said, finally looking up at her with eyes that seemed to hold more knowledge than they should. "I hear you found something interesting." Of course, Noah had already spoken to him. The observatory might be large, but information travelled fast among the small team of researchers. "Yes," she said, pulling up her data from the previous night. "An anomaly in the solar core, something that doesn't align with any known solar phenomenon." Professor Ward wheeled his chair over to her station, peering at the screen with intense focus. For several minutes he said nothing, simply absorbing the information before him. Evelyn waited, knowing better than to rush him. "How long have you been tracking this?" he finally asked, his voice unnaturally quiet. 3 weeks. It started as a minor fluctuation, barely detectable, but it's growing stronger, more defined. Ward nodded slowly. And what do you believe it is? I think... Evelyn took a deep breath. I think it's an object. Something inside the sun that shouldn't be there. She expected skepticism, perhaps even ridicule. What she didn't expect was the flash of fear that crossed Professor Ward's face. A look so brief she might have imagined it. Dr. Pierce, he said carefully, some anomalies are best left unexplored. Evelyn stared at him, taken aback. What? Professor, if there's something inside the sun... There are phenomena in this universe that defy our understanding, he interrupted, his voice low. Things that, when observed, begin to observe back. A chill ran down Evelyn's spine. This wasn't the rational, scientific mentor she knew. This was someone else. Someone who seemed afraid. Are you saying you've seen this before? She pressed. Professor Ward's eyes darted around the room as if checking for eavesdroppers. I'm saying be careful where you point that telescope, Dr. Pierce. Not everything we discover is meant to be found. With that cryptic warning, he wheeled his chair back to his own station, effectively ending the conversation and leaving Evelyn more disturbed than she had been before. The encounter with Professor Ward left Evelyn unsettled, but even more determined to understand what she was seeing. Throughout the morning, she ran additional analyses, cross-referencing her data with historical solar observations. By lunch, she had compiled enough evidence to warrant a full team meeting. The research team gathered in the conference room at 1 p.m. Noah was there, offering Evelyn an encouraging smile. Professor Ward sat at the far end of the table, his expression unreadable. And then there was Dr. Marcus Hill, his arms crossed, a look of preemptive skepticism on his face. Marcus had never hidden his resentment toward Evelyn. Her rapid rise in the field had overshadowed his own methodical career, and he rarely missed an opportunity to undermine her work. Thank you all for coming, Evelyn began, pulling up her presentation on the large screen. For the past 3 weeks, I've been tracking an anomaly within the solar core that I believe warrants our immediate attention. She walked them through her findings. The subtle fluctuations in energy output, the irregularities in radiation patterns, and most significantly the presence of what appeared to be a dense object within the sun's core. These readings suggest that whatever this is, it's not a natural part of the sun's structure, she explained, pointing to a particularly telling data visualization. Its density profile doesn't match any known element or compound that could naturally exist within a star. And what exactly are you suggesting this object is, Dr. Pierce? Marcus asked, his tone dripping with condescension. An alien spaceship? A portal to another dimension? Evelyn refused to take the bait. I'm not suggesting anything yet, Dr. Hill. I'm presenting data and seeking your input on what it might mean. Noah leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. Could it be a primordial black hole? Something captured during the sun's formation? A black hole would have detectable gravitational effects, Evelyn replied. This doesn't seem to exert gravity in the traditional sense. It's more like it's manipulating the sun's energy from within. Manipulating? Marcus scoffed. You're anthropomorphizing a star now. That's enough, Dr. Hill, Professor Ward interjected, speaking for the first time since the meeting began. Dr. Pierce's observations are methodologically sound, whatever we might think of her interpretations. Evelyn nodded, gratefully at Ward. Before continuing, I propose we dedicate more of our observatory resources to studying this phenomenon. Whatever it is, it's growing more pronounced, and I believe it could have significant implications for our understanding of stellar dynamics. After some debate, it was agreed that Evelyn would be granted additional telescope time and computational resources. Marcus voted against it, but was overruled by Professor Ward's executive decision. As the meeting adjourned, Evelyn felt a mixture of validation and apprehension. She had the green light to proceed, but Professor Ward's earlier warning still echoed in her mind. That evening, Noah joined Evelyn in the observatory's main control room as she prepared for an extended observation session. "You know, Marcus isn't entirely wrong to be skeptical," Noah said, helping her calibrate the equipment. "What you're suggesting is extraordinary, and extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence," Evelyn finished for him. "I know, that's exactly what I intend to find." Noah studied her face for a moment. "This isn't just professional curiosity for you, is it? There's something else driving you." Evelyn paused in her work, considering his question. "Have you ever had the feeling that you were meant to discover something? That somehow out of all the researchers in the world, a particular discovery was waiting specifically for you?" "That sounds almost mystical coming from you," Noah remarked with a gentle smile. "I know." She laughed softly. "Hardly the rational scientist, am I? But this anomaly, it feels personal somehow, like it's been waiting for me to find it." Noah's smile faded slightly. "Evelyn, I've seen brilliant minds go down rabbit holes before. It's easy to become obsessed, to start seeing patterns that aren't there, especially when you're sleep-deprived and isolated." "You think I'm imagining this?" There was an edge to her voice now. "No, that's not what I'm saying." Noah placed a hand on her arm. "The data shows something is there. I'm just concerned about what this investigation might do to you. You're already pushing yourself to the limit." Before Evelyn could respond, the lights in the control room flickered. Once, twice, then stabilized. "That's been happening a lot lately," she noted, frowning. "The power surges." "Probably just the mountain weather," Noah suggested, though he didn't sound entirely convinced. "The electrical grid up here has always been temperamental." But Evelyn wasn't so sure. The timing of these power fluctuations had begun to coincide with her observations of the solar anomaly. It was yet another data point in an increasingly complex puzzle. "I'll be fine, Noah," she finally said, turning back to her equipment. "This is important work. I can handle a few late nights." Noah looked like he wanted to say more, but thought better of it. "All right, just don't forget to come up for air occasionally. The sun will still be there tomorrow." After he left, Evelyn settled in for a long night of observation. The solar telescope was trained on the specific region of the sun's core where the anomaly had been detected. Hour after hour, she watched, measured, and recorded, the soft glow of the screens reflecting off her tired eyes. Around 3 a.m., something changed. The fluctuation patterns shifted, becoming more regular, almost like a pulse. Evelyn leaned closer to the screen, her heart racing. This wasn't random noise or a measurement error. This was a pattern, deliberate, rhythmic, almost like a signal. Just as she was about to run a spectral analysis on the new data, a sound caught her attention. A faint, metallic tapping coming from somewhere down the darkened hallway outside the control room. Tap, tap, tap. Pause, tap, 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 pause. "Hello?" she called out, rising from her chair. "Is someone there?" No response, just the continued tapping, now seeming to come from a different direction. The hairs on the back of Evelyn's neck stood up. The observatory should be empty at this hour. Gathering her courage, she moved toward the door, peering out into the dimly lit corridor. The emergency lights cast an eerie blue glow over the otherwise dark space. "Noah? Professor Ward?" She stepped into the hallway, her voice echoing slightly. The tapping stopped abruptly, replaced by a heavy silence that felt almost tangible. Evelyn stood frozen, straining to hear anything beyond the soft hum of the building's ventilation system. Then, from behind her, from back inside the control room, came a different sound. A low, vibrating hum that she felt in her chest more than heard with her ears. She whirled around to see all of the screens in the control room lighting up at once, data streaming across them faster than any human could process. The main visualization screen showed the sun's core, but something was different. The anomaly was moving, pulsing with a bright white light that shouldn't have been possible, given the sun's typical emission spectrum. As Evelyn stared, transfixed, the temperature in the room plummeted. Her breath formed visible clouds in the suddenly frigid air. The humming grew louder, more insistent, filling her head with a pressure that made it difficult to think. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, everything stopped. The screens returned to normal, the temperature rose, and the humming faded away. Evelyn stood in the middle of the control room, her heart pounding, sweat beading on her forehead despite the lingering chill. What she had just witnessed defied all rational explanation. Equipment malfunctions couldn't account for localized temperature drops or mysterious sounds. Something else was happening. Something connected to the anomaly she had discovered within the sun. With trembling hands, she saved all the data from the episode and copied it to her personal drive. Whatever was happening, she needed backup evidence. She also needed sleep. Her mind was beginning to play tricks on her, and she knew that continued sleep deprivation would only make matters worse. As she gathered her things to leave, a notification appeared on her phone, a breaking news alert. A massive solar flare, the largest recorded in decades, had just erupted from the sun's surface. Communication satellites around the world were experiencing disruptions. The timing couldn't be coincidental. Something was happening to the sun, and Evelyn was increasingly certain that the anomaly she had discovered was at the heart of it all. The drive home was a blur, her mind racing with possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. By the time she reached her apartment, dawn was breaking, the sun rising on the horizon, the very star that now filled her with a mixture of scientific curiosity and inexplicable dread. As Evelyn finally drifted off to sleep, the same nightmare returned. Floating in space, approaching the sun, the darkness within reaching out to her. But this time, as the darkness enveloped her, she heard something, a voice whispering from within the void. "Found you!" Evelyn jolted awake, her alarm blaring beside her bed. It was noon. She had managed to sleep for just over 5 hours. The remnants of the nightmare clung to her like cobwebs, that final whispered phrase echoing in her mind. "Found you." She shook her head, trying to dispel the unsettling feeling. Dreams were just the brain processing information, nothing more. Yet this one had felt different, more real than any dream had a right to be. Her phone was filled with missed calls and text messages, mostly from Noah and Professor Ward, but also several from Ava. The solar flare had made national news, and communications were still spotty in some regions. Before she could respond to any of them, a sharp knock at her door startled her. "Evelyn, I know you're in there." Ava's voice carried through the door, concern mixing with irritation. Sighing, Evelyn dragged herself out of bed and opened the door to find her sister standing there, arms crossed, worry etched across her face. "You look terrible," Ava said bluntly, pushing past Evelyn into the apartment. At 34, Ava Pierce was everything Evelyn was not. Stylish, sociable, and firmly grounded in the human world, rather than the cosmic one. Her dark hair was cut in a fashionable bob, and her clothes were always impeccable. Today was no exception, despite the obvious concern that had brought her here. "Good to see you too," Evelyn mumbled, closing the door. "I've been calling you for hours," Ava said, her eyes scanning Evelyn's disheveled appearance. "There's a massive solar storm happening. Communications are down in half the state, and my sister, who studies the sun, isn't answering her phone. What was I supposed to think?" "I was sleeping," Evelyn explained, moving to the kitchen to start a pot of coffee. "Long night at the observatory." "Of course it was," Ava sighed, following her. "Is this solar flare thing related to your research? My news director is desperate for an expert to interview, and I thought of you." Evelyn paused, coffee scoop in hand. "I'm not sure that's a good idea." "Why not? It's perfect. You get to talk about your work. I get an exclusive with a leading astrophysicist, and maybe you finally get some recognition outside of academic circles. Ava perched on one of the kitchen stools, watching her sister carefully. Unless there's something you're not telling me. There was plenty Evelyn wasn't telling her. About the anomaly, about the strange occurrences at the observatory, about her growing sense that something fundamentally wrong was happening within our sun. But how could she explain any of that without sounding paranoid? It's complicated, she finally said. My current research is sensitive. I'm not ready to discuss it publicly. Ava's journalistic instincts kicked in. Sensitive how? Evelyn, what exactly are you working on up there? Before Evelyn could formulate a response that wouldn't alarm her sister further, her phone rang. It was Noah. I need to take this, she said, grateful for the interruption. Noah didn't bother with pleasantries. Evelyn, you need to get to the observatory now. The readings after last night's flare, they're unlike anything we've ever seen, and Professor Ward is acting strange. Strange how? Evelyn asked, already moving toward her bedroom to change. He's locked himself in his office, won't speak to anyone. Marcus is on the warpath, blaming your research for diverting resources away from real science. As he puts it, it's chaos here. I'll be there in 30 minutes, she promised, ending the call. Let me guess, Ava said from the doorway of Evelyn's bedroom. You're running back to the observatory. I have to, Evelyn replied, pulling on a fresh shirt. Something's happening, Ava. Something important. More important than your own well-being? When was the last time you ate a proper meal? Or had a full night's sleep? Ava's voice softened. I'm worried about you, Ev. You're becoming like Dad was near the end. Obsessed. Disconnected. The comparison stung. Their father, also a physicist, had descended into obsession with his work in the years following their mother's death, eventually suffering a fatal heart attack in his laboratory. Evelyn had always told herself she was different, more balanced, but lately... This isn't like that, she insisted, though doubt crept into her voice. I'm making a potentially groundbreaking discovery. It requires focus. Just promise me you'll be careful, Ava said, her eyes pleading. Whatever this discovery is, it's not worth your health. Evelyn nodded, though her mind was already back at the observatory, back to the anomaly, back to that voice in her dream. I promise. The drive to the observatory was tense, with Ava insisting on accompanying her. If you won't tell me what's going on, maybe I can see for myself, she had said, and Evelyn was too tired to argue. When they arrived, the atmosphere at the facility was charged with nervous energy. Staff members hurried through the corridors, speaking in hushed tones. Equipment that normally hummed with steady precision now sputtered and fluctuated, displays flickering with interference. Noah met them in the main hall, relief washing over his face at the sight of Evelyn. Thank God you're here, he said before noticing Ava. Oh, hello. I didn't realize you were bringing company. She insisted, Evelyn explained. Noah, this is my sister, Ava. Ava, Dr. Noah Campbell. Pleased to meet you, Ava said, extending her hand, though I wish it were under better circumstances. As Noah led them through the observatory, he filled Evelyn in on the developments since the previous night. The solar flare had been followed by a series of smaller eruptions, each precisely timed, each originating from the exact spot where Evelyn's anomaly had been detected. It's as if something is testing the sun's response mechanisms, Noah explained, his voice low, pushing buttons to see what happens. That sounds, deliberate, Ava interjected, her journalistic mind picking up on the implications. Noah and Evelyn exchanged glances but said nothing. As they entered the main research hall, Ava suddenly stopped, her hand flying to her temple. Whoa, she murmured, swaying slightly. Ava? What's wrong? Evelyn grabbed her sister's arm to steady her. I don't know, just got really dizzy all of a sudden. Ava's face had gone pale, and there's a strange pressure, like something's pushing against my thoughts. Evelyn, I don't like this place. It's wrong. The hairs on Evelyn's arms stood up. Her sister had always been intuitive, sensitive to atmospheres and energies, in a way that Evelyn, with her focus on measurable data, had never been. If Ava was sensing something wrong here. Maybe you should wait outside, Evelyn suggested, concern creeping into her voice. Ava shook her head, the colour slowly returning to her face. No, I'm fine now. It passed, but seriously, what is going on here? The air feels heavy. Before Evelyn could respond, Professor Ward's office door swung open at the end of the hall. The professor himself stood in the doorway, his appearance shocking both Pierce sisters. Ward, normally meticulously groomed despite his eccentric personality, looked like he hadn't slept in days. His silver hair stood on end. His clothes were rumpled, and his eyes held a wild, almost feverish light. "Dr. Pierce," he called out, his voice hoarse. "In my office, now." Evelyn hesitated, glancing at Noah and Ava. "Stay with her," she instructed Noah before moving toward Ward's office. The professor's office was in disarray, papers strewn across every surface, bookshelves emptied onto the floor, as if he had been searching frantically for something. The walls were covered with printouts of solar data, some recent, others yellowed with age, all connected by a web of red string and hastily scribbled notes. "You've seen it, haven't you?" Ward asked, as soon as the door closed behind them. The darkness within the light. Evelyn stared at him, a chill running down her spine. "Professor, I'm not sure what you mean." "Don't play coy with me, Evelyn," he snapped, more forcefully than he had ever spoken to her before. "Your data, your observations, they match mine from 20 years ago. Patterns that shouldn't exist, fluctuations that defy all natural explanation." He gestured wildly at the papers covering his walls. "I abandoned the research when I realized what was happening. But you've gone further, haven't you? It's responding to you." Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. 20 years ago? You've seen this anomaly before?" Ward laughed, a hollow sound devoid of humour. Anomaly. Such a scientific, sterile word for something so ancient. So aware. He moved closer, lowering his voice. "It's not an anomaly, Dr. Pierce. It's an entity, and it has been dormant within our sun for longer than humanity has existed." The revelation hit Evelyn like a physical blow. Part of her wanted to dismiss Ward's words as the ramblings of a mind pushed beyond its limits by stress and lack of sleep. But another part, the part that had heard that whispered, "Found you" in her dreams, knew he was right. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "A parasite," Ward replied, his eyes darting around as if afraid of being overheard. "A cosmic entity that attaches itself to stars, feeding on their energy, growing stronger over millennia. The ancients knew about it, wrote about it in terms of gods and demons, but they were describing something very real, something that occasionally makes its presence known." He pulled a tattered journal from his desk drawer. "I found references to similar phenomena throughout human history. Solar events that coincided with strange occurrences on Earth. Mass hallucinations, unexplained phenomena, people claiming to hear voices from the sky." Evelyn's scientific mind rebelled against such mystical interpretations, but the evidence before her was becoming harder to ignore. "If what you're saying is true, why is it becoming active now? Why has it revealed itself to us?" Ward's eyes bore into hers with frightening intensity. "Because you looked too closely, Dr. Pierce. You observed it with our advanced instruments, with a level of scrutiny no human has achieved before. And in doing so, you caught its attention." His voice dropped even lower. "When you gaze into the abyss gazes back." A knock at the door interrupted them. Noah's voice came through. "Evelyn, is everything okay in there? Ava's not feeling well, and I think we should get her some air." Ward grabbed at Evelyn's arm, his fingers digging in with surprising strength. "Be careful who you trust, Dr. Pierce. It can influence minds, plant thoughts, and it's growing stronger by the day." "What do we do?" Evelyn asked, trying to keep the fear from her voice. "Do?" Ward released her arm, his expression suddenly resigned. "We do nothing. We turn our telescopes away, we destroy the data, we forget what we've seen. It's the only way." But Evelyn knew she couldn't do that. Whatever this entity was, ignoring it wouldn't make it go away. If it truly was feeding on the sun, the implications for Earth, for all life in our solar system, were catastrophic. "I need to see the latest data," she said firmly. Ward stared at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "It's your funeral, Dr. Pierce. Quite literally, I fear." When Evelyn emerged from Ward's office, she found Noah supporting a clearly distressed Ava, whose face had gone ashen again. "We need to get her outside," Noah said urgently. She nearly collapsed. Together, they helped Ava to the observatory's entrance, where the fresh mountain air seemed to revive her somewhat. She sat on a bench, taking deep breaths, while Evelyn hovered anxiously beside her. "What happened in there?" Noah asked Evelyn in a low voice, stepping a few paces away from Ava. "Ward's seen the anomaly before," Evelyn replied, keeping her voice down. 20 years ago, he abandoned the research because he was afraid of what he found." Noah's expression grew grave. "And what exactly did he find?" Evelyn hesitated, knowing how it would sound. "He believes it's some kind of entity, a parasite feeding on the sun's energy." To her surprise, Noah didn't immediately dismiss the idea. "That would explain the energy fluctuations we've been recording. If something is siphoning power from the core..." "You actually believe this?" Evelyn had expected skepticism, even from Noah. "I believe something is happening that defies our current understanding of solar physics," he replied carefully. "Whether it's an entity or some previously unknown natural phenomenon, the effect is the same. It's disrupting the sun's normal functions, and that poses a very real danger to Earth." A weak voice interrupted them. "I told you this place was wrong." They turned to find Ava watching them, her reporter's instincts evidently still sharp despite her physical distress. "You two are talking about something inside the sun," she continued. "Something alive." Evelyn sighed, moving to sit beside her sister. "It's complicated, Ava." "Don't patronize me," Ava snapped, some of her usual fire returning. "I may not be a scientist, but I know when something serious is happening. And whatever's going on in there," she gestured towards the observatory, "affected me physically. I felt it pushing against my mind, Evelyn, like it was searching for something." The description sent a chill through Evelyn. It matched too closely with her own experiences, with the pressure she had felt during the strange events in the control room, with the voice in her dreams. "We need to continue our research," she finally said, looking at both Ava and Noah. "If there is something inside the sun, something dangerous, ignoring it won't make it go away. We need to understand what it is, what it wants, and how to stop it if necessary." "And if Ward is right," Noah asked quietly, "if studying it only makes it stronger, makes it more aware of us?" Evelyn had no answer for that. The weight of the decision pressed down on her. Continue pursuing knowledge at the risk of drawing the entity's attention, or turn away and pretend they had never discovered it, potentially leaving Earth defenseless against whatever was to come. "I can't walk away from this," she finally said. "But I understand if you want to, Noah. This isn't your fight." Noah's expression softened. "Of course it's my fight. We're colleagues, remember? Besides, someone needs to keep you from working yourself to death." He turned to Ava. "You, however, should probably stay away from the observatory. If you're sensitive to whatever this is, it's not safe for you here." Ava looked like she wanted to argue, but thought better of it. "Fine. But I want regular updates. And at the first sign that things are getting worse, you both get out. Promise me, Evelyn." Evelyn nodded, though she already suspected it wouldn't be that simple. whatever connection had been established between her and the solar anomaly. She doubted it would let her go easily. The next few days were a blur of intense research, strange phenomena, and mounting tension at the observatory. Evelyn practically lived in the control room, analysing data, running simulations, and coordinating continuous observations of the anomaly. Noah was her constant companion, providing both scientific support and much-needed reality checks when her theories veered into the improbable. Professor Ward had withdrawn almost entirely, emerging from his office only occasionally to check on their progress with haunted eyes. Dr. Marcus Hill, meanwhile, had become increasingly hostile, openly accusing Evelyn of fabricating data to support her delusional theories, as he called them. The anomaly itself had grown more pronounced with each passing day. What had begun as a subtle fluctuation in energy readings had evolved into a distinct, dense core of darkness, visible even through the observatory's standard solar imaging equipment. It pulsed with a rhythm that defied natural explanation, expanding and contracting like a beating heart. Most disturbing were the communications disruptions that had begun to plague the observatory. Equipment would suddenly malfunction, computers would display strange symbols before crashing, and sometimes, in the dead of night when Evelyn worked alone, voices would emerge from static on the radio channels, whispering unintelligible phrases that nonetheless left her with a sense of dread. On the fifth night, after her conversation with Ward, Evelyn made a breakthrough. Analysing historical solar data alongside current readings, she discovered a pattern, a cyclic recurrence of similar anomalies throughout recorded history, each coinciding with significant events on Earth. Massive solar storms, auroras visible at unprecedented latitudes, and widespread reports of strange phenomena. The most recent major occurrence had been approximately 20 years ago, exactly when Professor Ward had abandoned his research. But this time the anomaly was stronger, more defined. Whatever had been dormant within the sun was awakening, and Evelyn was increasingly certain that her observations had somehow triggered or accelerated the process. As she sat alone in the control room, the clock ticking past 2 a.m., Evelyn felt the familiar pressure building in her head, that sense of something pushing against her thoughts, searching, probing. The room temperature dropped suddenly, her breath forming visible clouds in the frigid air. The main monitor flickered, the image of the solar core distorting before stabilizing on a perfect circle of brilliant white light amid the churning plasma. The anomaly, now fully visible and pulsing with hypnotic rhythm. A soft humming filled the room, resonating in Evelyn's bones, drawing her closer to the screen. She tried to look away but found she couldn't, her body no longer responding to her commands. The white light expanded, filling the screen, filling her vision, until there was nothing else. And then, with perfect clarity, she heard it, a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, from within her own mind and from the depths of space simultaneously. "You found me." The same words from her dream, but now spoken with a presence and power that left no doubt about their reality. "Who are you?" Evelyn whispered, surprised she could still speak. "I am ancient," the voice replied, each word sending ripples of energy through her body. "I have been waiting, dormant, gathering strength. What do you want?" A pause, as if the entity was considering how to translate its desires into terms a human could comprehend. "Connection," it finally said. "Understanding. I've been alone for so long, Evelyn Pierce. Until you looked deeper, saw beyond the veil of plasma and radiation. You, with your curious mind and relentless pursuit of knowledge. You found me when no other would dare." A part of Evelyn, the rational scientific part, screamed that this was impossible, that she was hallucinating from sleep deprivation and stress. But another part, a deeper, more intuitive part, knew this was real. Something ancient and powerful had awakened within our sun, and it had chosen her as its point of contact. "Are you hurting the sun?" she managed to ask, thinking of Ward's parasite theory. A sound like laughter echoed in her mind. "The sun and I are one. I feed on its energy, yes, but I also sustain it, guide it. Without me, your star would have burned erratically, endangering your fragile world countless times. I am its keeper, its conscience." Relief washed over Evelyn. Not a parasite then, but a symbiote, a beneficial presence. Perhaps Ward had been wrong, had misinterpreted what he saw. Then why hide? Why remain unknown to us? "Your species was not ready," the voice said, a note of sadness entering its tone. "You still cling to your physical forms, your limited perceptions. But you, Evelyn, you are different. You see beyond, reach further. You could join me, become more than human, help me guide the star that gives your world life." The offer was seductive, appealing to her lifelong desire to understand the cosmos in ways no human ever had. To merge with this entity, to experience the sun from within, to transcend the limitations of human existence. "How?" she asked, her scientific curiosity overriding caution. "Let me in," the voice whispered, now sounding closer, more intimate. "Open your mind completely, and I will show you wonders beyond imagination." As tempting as the offer was, something held Evelyn back. A flicker of doubt, a memory of Professor Ward's fear, of Ava's distress in the observatory. If this entity was truly benevolent, why had it affected them so negatively? "I need time," she said, fighting to maintain some semblance of control. "This is a lot to process." The pressure in her mind increased, a flare of anger rippling through the connection. "Time is luxury I no longer have," the voice hissed. "I have waited millennia, and now I am awake, hungry, ready to expand beyond this stellar prison. You will help me, Evelyn Pierce, willingly or not." The mask of benevolence had slipped, revealing something darker, more predatory beneath. Ward had been right after all. This was no symbiote, but a parasite. An entity that had been using the sun as both food source and hiding place, biding its time until it could reach further. With tremendous effort, Evelyn tore her gaze away from the screen, breaking the hypnotic connection. Immediately the pressure in her mind receded, the room temperature normalized, and the humming stopped. The monitor showed only the standard solar imaging again, though the anomaly remained visible, pulsing with what now seemed like angry intensity. Shaken, Evelyn gathered her things and left the control room, knowing she needed help, needed allies who would believe what she had experienced. Noah would listen, but would he believe? Ava would believe, but could she help? And Ward had known all along what they were dealing with, but had chosen to hide rather than confront it. As she stepped outside the observatory, Evelyn looked up at the night sky, the stars twinkling innocently above. The sun was on the other side of the earth now, but she could still feel it, feel the entity within it. Watching, waiting, planning. Whatever it was, whatever it wanted, she knew now that it posed a very real threat, not just to her, but to all of humanity. The entity had said she was different, that she could see beyond. Perhaps that was why it had chosen her, why it had revealed itself to her. But that connection was a double-edged sword, one she would now have to use against it. With renewed determination, Evelyn headed for her car. She had work to do, preparations to make. The fight for the sun, for Earth itself, had just begun, and she was somehow, improbably, at the center of it all. As dawn broke over the mountains, Evelyn sat in her car, unable to bring herself to drive home. What she had experienced in the control room, the entity, its voice, its hunger, had shaken her to her core. She needed to warn the others, but how? Who would believe that an ancient, malevolent consciousness lived within the sun and had spoken directly to her? Her phone chimed with a text from Noah. "Where are you? Found something in the historical data. Need you back here." The thought of returning to the observatory filled Evelyn with dread. But she couldn't abandon her colleagues, or her responsibility. If this entity was as dangerous as she now believed, they needed every piece of information they could gather to fight it. When she re-entered the facility an hour later, having stopped only for coffee and a quick shower at her apartment, Evelyn immediately sensed something was wrong. The atmosphere had changed. The air felt charged, almost vibrating, with unseen energy. Staff members moved through the corridors with vacant expressions, their eyes slightly unfocused, their movements mechanical. Noah was waiting for her in the research library, surrounded by old journals and astronomical records dating back centuries. He looked up as she entered, dark circles under his eyes suggesting he had been there all night. "You look terrible," she remarked, setting a coffee beside him. "Speak for yourself," he replied with a weak smile. "But I found something. Look at this." He pushed an ancient star chart toward her, its edges yellowed and crumbling with age. "This is from an observatory in Prague, dated 1687. The astronomer noted unusual solar activity over a period of months, followed by what he described as a darkness within the light, a void that watches. Sound familiar?" Evelyn's throat went dry. "There's more?" Noah nodded grimly. "Similar accounts from ancient China, from Egyptian astronomical records, from Mayan observations, all describing the same phenomenon, a darkness within the sun that grows, pulses, and eventually reaches out." "Reaches out how?" Evelyn asked, though part of her already knew the answer. "That's where the records get strange. Reports of people hearing voices, of mass hallucinations, of individuals becoming vessels for what they believed were solar deities." Noah met her eyes. "Evelyn, whatever this thing is, it's been trying to reach Earth for thousands of years." "It spoke to me," she whispered, the confession tumbling out before she could stop it. "Last night, in the control room, it offered me things. Knowledge, transcendence. Then it threatened me when I hesitated." To her surprise, Noah didn't look shocked. "I thought as much. You've been different since this all started. More distant, almost feverish in your focus. I was worried it was affecting you somehow." "You believe me?" Relief washed over her. "After what I've read in these accounts, yes." He gestured at the scattered documents. "But Evelyn, this entity, whatever it is, it doesn't just communicate. It infects, it changes people. Many of the historical accounts end with the primary observer becoming something else, a conduit for the entity's influence on Earth." The implication was clear. Evelyn's connection to the entity made her both valuable and dangerous. "We need to tell the others," she said firmly. "Ward already knows something, but Marcus, the rest of the staff, they need to be warned." Noah hesitated. "I tried talking to Marcus this morning. He wouldn't listen. In fact, he seemed angry that I was even bringing it up. And the others, I'm not sure they're entirely themselves anymore." A chill ran down Evelyn's spine. "What do you mean?" "They're working, going through the motions, but there's something off about them. They don't speak unless spoken to. They move in strange, coordinated ways. And they've all been focused on adjusting the observatory's equipment, strengthening the solar telescope's connection, boosting signal reception." "It's using them," Evelyn realized with horror. "It's preparing for something bigger." As if in response to her words, the lights flickered and a low hum began to resonate through the building. The same hum she had heard in the control room during her encounter with the entity. "We need to get out of here," Noah said, grabbing her arm. "Now!" They hurried through the corridors, passing staff members who now stood motionless, their heads tilted as if listening to something only they could hear. The humming grew louder, more insistent, seemingly emanating from the walls themselves. Just as they reached the main hall, Professor Ward appeared, blocking their path. His appearance had deteriorated further. His skin was now pale and waxy, dark veins visible beneath, and his eyes had a strange, luminous quality. "Leaving so soon, Dr. Pierce?" he asked, his voice oddly musical, layered with harmonics that shouldn't have been possible from human vocal cords. "But the connection is just beginning. The gate is opening." "That's not Ward," Noah whispered, pulling Evelyn back. "Oh, but it is," Ward's body replied, smiling in a way that stretched his face unnaturally. "Malcolm is still here, just expanded, improved, as you both will be." Behind Ward, other staff members began to emerge from doorways and corridors, all wearing the same vacant expression, all moving with the same fluid, unnatural grace. "Run!" Evelyn breathed, turning to pull Noah toward a side exit. They fled through emergency doors, setting off alarms that seemed oddly muted compared to the humming that now filled the entire observatory. Outside, the morning sunlight struck Evelyn like a physical blow, suddenly too bright, too intense. She raised a hand to shield her eyes and was horrified to see dark patches spreading across her skin, reminiscent of sunspots. "What's happening to me?" she gasped, showing Noah her hand. His eyes widened. "It's already started. The connection. It's changing you physically." Before either of them could say more, a voice called out from across the parking lot. "Evelyn! Noah!" Ava was hurrying toward them, concern etched across her face. "I've been trying to reach you for hours. The news is going crazy. Solar flares, communications blackouts worldwide. What's—" She stopped short, staring at Evelyn's spotted hand. "Oh my God, what is that?" "We need to get away from here," Noah said urgently, already moving toward his car. "I'll explain on the way." "On the way where?" Ava demanded, still staring at her sister with growing horror. "Anywhere but here," Evelyn replied, her voice strained. The sunlight on her skin felt different now, not painful but alive somehow, as if it was seeping into her, becoming part of her. "The observatory is compromised. The staff ward, they're all under its control." "Under what's control?" Ava asked, though the fear in her eyes suggested she already suspected the answer. "The entity in the sun," Noah replied, opening his car door. "It's making its move, and we need to figure out how to stop it before it's too late." As they drove down the mountain road, Evelyn huddled in the back seat, away from the windows, trying to minimize her exposure to the sunlight. Noah explained what they had discovered to Ava, whose journalistic skepticism quickly gave way to terrified acceptance as she glanced back at her sister's deteriorating condition. The dark patches had spread up Evelyn's arms now, forming swirling patterns that pulsed in rhythm with the humming that still echoed in her mind. Worse, she could feel the entity's presence growing stronger, pushing against the barriers of her consciousness, seeking entry. "It wants to use me as a conduit," she explained, her voice weak. "A bridge between itself and Earth. That's why it revealed itself to me. Why it chose me. Because I was already looking, already reaching out intellectually." "How do we stop it?" Ava asked, turning fully in her seat to face her sister. Evelyn shook her head. "I don't know. The historical accounts Noah found all ended the same way. The primary observer either succumbed, becoming a vessel for the entity, or what?" Ava pressed. "Or they removed themselves from the equation," Noah finished grimly. "Self-sacrifice to break the connection." Ava's face paled. "That's not an option," she said firmly. "There has to be another way." As they drove into the city, Evelyn's condition worsened. The patches on her skin began to glow faintly, and she found her thoughts becoming jumbled, interspersed with alien images and sensations. Vast cosmic voids, the nuclear fires of a million suns, the cold hunger of something ancient and patient. "We need somewhere dark," she managed to say. "Somewhere I can think without its influence." Noah nodded, turning the car toward the university campus. The physics department has a shielded laboratory. In the basement, no electromagnetic radiation can penetrate it. It was designed for sensitive quantum experiments, but it might work for this too. The campus was eerily deserted when they arrived, most classes cancelled due to the communications disruptions caused by the solar flares. Noah led them through back entrances, using his faculty access card to reach the basement laboratory. Inside the shielded room, with its lead-lined walls and specialized insulation, Evelyn felt the pressure in her mind ease slightly. The humming receded to a distant murmur, and the glowing patches on her skin dimmed. For the first time in hours, she could think clearly again. "We need to understand exactly what this entity is before we can fight it," she said, settling into a chair as Noah powered up the lab's computers. "It's ancient, powerful, and it feeds on solar energy. But it has limitations. It needs a human conduit to fully connect with Earth." "Why?" Ava asked, pacing the small room. "If it's so powerful, why does it need humans at all?" "Different plane of existence, maybe," Noah suggested, typing rapidly. "It exists as energy, as consciousness without physical form. It needs our biology, our neural networks to anchor itself in our reality." "That makes sense," Evelyn agreed, watching as the dark patches on her arms slowly pulsed. "It's been influencing humanity for thousands of years, but always through intermediaries. People like me who studied the sun too closely, who opened themselves to its influence." A thought struck her. The observatory's equipment, it was enhancing the connection, strengthening the signal between the sun and Earth. That's why the staff was modifying it. "So, if we disable the observatory, we might weaken its hold," Ava suggested hopefully. Evelyn shook her head. "It's too late for that. The connection has been established. It's inside me now, growing stronger by the minute. Even in this shielded room, I can feel it pushing, searching for a way in." Noah's computer chimed as he accessed the university's research database. "Here's something interesting. A paper from the quantum physics department on disrupting entangled particle states through focused electromagnetic pulses." "What does that mean in English?" Ava demanded. "It means," Evelyn said slowly, a plan forming in her mind, "that a strong enough electromagnetic pulse might be able to break the quantum connection between me and the entity, sever the link before it can fully take hold." "The observatory has an EMP system," Noah remembered, "a failsafe designed to protect the sensitive equipment from solar storms. If we could modify it, increase its power." "We could use it to break the connection," Evelyn finished, "but we'd have to go back there, back into the entity's stronghold." "No way," Ava protested. "You can barely function in sunlight now. And the staff, Ward, they're all under its control. It's suicide." "If we don't stop it, what happens?" Evelyn asked quietly. "The historical records, Noah. What happened when the entity successfully established a foothold on Earth?" Noah's expression darkened. "The accounts are vague, often dismissed as superstition or mass hysteria, but they all describe the same basic outcome: widespread mental influence, people acting in coordinated, unnatural ways, serving the entity's will, essentially a slow takeover of humanity itself." The weight of their situation settled over the room. This wasn't just about saving Evelyn anymore. It was about protecting humanity from an ancient, malevolent force that had been planning its invasion for millennia. "I have to go back," Evelyn said firmly. "I'm already connected to it. I might be able to use that connection against it. Distract it long enough for you to reach the EMP controls." "I'm not letting you sacrifice yourself," Ava insisted, tears welling in her eyes. "There has to be another way." But even as she spoke, all three of them knew the truth. Evelyn was already sacrificed. The entity's influence was spreading through her system, changing her on a cellular level. The patches on her skin now covered most of her body, and sometimes when she spoke, her voice carried those same unnatural harmonics, they had heard from Ward. "We'll go tonight," Noah decided, his voice heavy with resignation. "After sunset, when the entity's direct influence might be weaker. I know the access codes for the failsafe system. And I'll create a distraction at the front entrance," Ava added, her journalist's determination shining through her fear. "Draw attention away from you two." Evelyn looked at her sister and Noah, possibly the only two people left unaffected by the entity's influence, and felt a surge of gratitude and sorrow. "Thank you," she whispered. "Both of you." As night fell, they prepared for their return to the observatory. Noah gathered equipment from the physics lab, signal jammers, electromagnetic sensors, anything that might help them navigate the entity's influence. Ava called in favors from her news contacts, ensuring that a crew would be waiting near the observatory, ready to broadcast a story about unusual activities at the facility. Evelyn, meanwhile, fought a private battle within her own mind. The entity's presence grew stronger with each passing hour, whispering promises, threats, visions of cosmic power. It showed her glimpses of what she could become if she surrendered, a being of pure energy, free from the limitations of her human form, able to traverse the stars with mere thought. "You cannot stop what has already begun," it whispered as they drove back up the mountain road, the observatory looming ahead, like a sentinel against the night sky. "You are mine now, Evelyn Pierce. A perfect vessel, a perfect bridge." "Not yet," she murmured, drawing concerned glances from Noah and Ava. "Not yet, and not ever if I can help it." The observatory glowed with an unnatural light as they approached, pulses of energy visible through its dome and windows. Staff members moved around the perimeter like sleepwalkers, their motions synchronized, their attention focused skyward, where the stars were periodically obscured by rippling waves of aurora-like phenomena, the entity's influence becoming visible in Earth's atmosphere. "The news van is in position," Ava said, checking her phone. "They'll start broadcasting in 5 minutes, claiming they've received tips about unusual experiments being conducted here. That should draw the attention of whoever's still functioning in there." "The failsafe controls are in the basement," Noah explained, showing them a schematic of the building on his tablet. 3 levels down, behind the main server room, it's designed to flood the entire facility with an electromagnetic pulse strong enough to fry every piece of electronic equipment. A last resort if the solar telescopes ever captured too much radiation during a major flare. "Will it be strong enough to break the entity's connection?" Evelyn asked, the patches on her skin glowing brighter now that they were closer to the observatory. "Theoretically, yes, but I'll need time to modify it, increase its strength." Noah looked at her with concern. "Can you hold out that long?" Evelyn nodded, though she wasn't at all certain. The entity's presence was overwhelming now, its thoughts intertwining with hers, its hunger and anticipation becoming her own. "I'll try." As Ava left to join the news crew, Evelyn and Noah approached the observatory from the rear, using Noah's access card to enter through a service door. Inside, the humming that had been Evelyn's constant companion for days filled the air, now loud enough for Noah to hear as well. "It's like the building itself is vibrating," he whispered, leading Evelyn through darkened corridors. They encountered no one on their way to the basement stairs, which should have been reassuring but instead felt ominous, as if the entity knew they were coming and was waiting for them, laying a trap. Evelyn's suspicion proved correct when they reached the basement level and found Professor Ward standing before the server room door, his form now barely recognizable as human. His skin glowed with the same patterns that marked Evelyn's, but more advanced, more complete. Veins of light pulsed beneath his surface and his eyes burned with white fire. "Dr. Pierce, Dr. Campbell," he greeted them, his voice a chorus of harmonics. "We've been expecting you. The final phase requires your participation, Evelyn. Your resistance is inconvenient, but ultimately futile." That's not Ward anymore, Noah murmured, positioning himself slightly in front of Evelyn. Oh, but I am, the figure responded, smiling unnaturally. I'm more Malcolm Ward than I ever was before. More complete, more connected, as Evelyn will soon be. What are you? Evelyn demanded, fighting against the pull she felt towards this transformed version of her mentor. I am ancient, the entity replied through Ward. Born in the first moments of this galaxy's creation, a consciousness of pure energy seeking form, seeking connection. Your sun has been my home, my prison, my sustenance for billions of years. But now, thanks to you, Evelyn, I've found a way to extend beyond it, to touch your world, to experience physical sensation through human vessels. You're a parasite, Noah spat, using people like puppets. Ward's face twisted in anger. I am evolution. I am transcendence. What I offer is beyond your comprehension. A merging of consciousness, a unity of purpose. Through me, humanity will reach the stars, will become more than the limited, fragile creatures you are now. As he spoke, more figures emerged from the shadows. The observatory staff, all transformed to varying degrees, all moving with that same unnatural coordination. You see? Ward gestured to them. They've already accepted my gift. Only you resist, Evelyn, despite being the most suitable vessel, the most perfectly attuned mind I have found in millennia. Evelyn felt the entity pushing harder against her consciousness, trying to overwhelm her remaining defenses. The patches on her skin burned brighter, and she dropped to her knees as pain lanced through her body. Evelyn! Noah knelt beside her, gripping her shoulders. Fight it! We're almost there! Through her agony, Evelyn had a moment of clarity. The entity was focused on her, pouring its energy into breaking her resistance. This was their chance. Go, she gasped to Noah. Get to the failsafe. I'll keep it occupied. Noah hesitated, clearly torn between helping her and completing their mission. Go, she shouted, her voice momentarily harmonizing with the entity's influence, as Noah darted past the transformed Ward, who was too focused on Evelyn to stop him. She surrendered, not to the entity, but to the connection itself. Rather than fighting the invasion of her mind, she drove her consciousness along the link toward the entity, toward the sun. Instantly, her perception shifted. She was no longer kneeling on the cold floor of the observatory basement. She was floating in an infinite void of energy and light, facing a presence so vast and ancient, it defied comprehension. The entity, in its true form, a writhing mass of darkness amid the solar fire, a parasite that had attached itself to the sun in the universe's infancy and grown powerful feeding on its energy. Clever, the entity acknowledged, its thoughts enveloping her. But futile. Your physical form remains under my influence, and your friend will never reach the failsafe in time. Why Earth? Evelyn's consciousness asked. Why now? Your world is ripe, advanced enough to serve my needs, primitive enough to offer little resistance. And you, Evelyn Pierce, provided the perfect conduit. Your obsession with the sun, your willingness to look deeper than others dared, your isolated mind so easy to influence and mould. As the entity spoke, Evelyn became aware that her gambit had worked. It was fully focused on her, on this mental confrontation, its attention drawn away from Noah and his mission. She could sense the distant echo of events in the physical world. Noah fighting his way through the transformed staff, reaching the failsafe controls, beginning the complex sequence to trigger the electromagnetic pulse. They'll stop you, she told the entity, struggling to maintain her mental presence against its overwhelming power. Humanity will resist. Some will, it acknowledged, but most will embrace what I offer: unity, purpose, transcendence. Your sister, for instance, has such potential. I can feel her mind even now, approaching the observatory with others. She will make an excellent secondary vessel. The mention of Ava filled Evelyn with renewed determination. This parasitic entity would not take her sister, would not use Ava as it had used Ward and the others. "You won't have her," Evelyn's consciousness flared with protective rage. "You won't have any of them." With all her remaining mental strength, she thrust herself deeper into the connection, not fighting against the entity, but embracing it, surrounding it, binding it to her. If she could hold it here, keep it focused on her consciousness rather than the physical world, Noah would have the time he needed. In the basement of the observatory, Evelyn's physical body convulsed, the patches on her skin now burning with blinding intensity. Ward and the transformed staff surrounded her, channeling the entity's energy into her, believing they were completing the conversion process. Meanwhile, Noah had reached the failsafe controls, fighting through layers of security and modifications made by the influence staff. He worked frantically, rerouting power, increasing the pulse strength beyond its safety limits, preparing for a discharge that would likely destroy the entire facility. Outside, Ava had abandoned the news crew distraction, a sense of dread driving her back toward the observatory itself. As she approached the main entrance, she saw the unnatural light pulsing from within, felt the humming vibration in the air, and knew something catastrophic was unfolding. In the void between minds, Evelyn's consciousness began to fragment under the entity's assault. It had realized her strategy and was now fighting to break free of her mental grip, to return its attention to the physical world where Noah was about to trigger the failsafe. "You cannot contain me," it raged, tendrils of darkness lashing against her mental barriers. "I am ancient. I have consumed stars. Worlds have fallen before me." "But you've never faced humanity," Evelyn responded, her consciousness flaring one last time. "You've never faced me." In that moment, she surrendered the last vestiges of her individual self, expanding her consciousness to fully envelop the entity, creating a prison of human thought and emotion that it could not easily escape. Love, fear, hope, despair, the full spectrum of human experience became a cage around the ancient parasite, disorienting it, binding it. In the physical world, Noah completed the failsafe sequence, his hand hovering over the final activation control. "I'm sorry, Evelyn," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. Ava burst into the basement just as Noah pressed the button, her scream of "No!" lost in the sudden whine of capacitors charging, of energy building to catastrophic levels. Evelyn's body, now more light than flesh, rose from the floor, suspended in the air as Ward and the transformed staff backed away in sudden fear. Through lips that barely resembled human anymore, she spoke her final words, "It's done." The electromagnetic pulse erupted from the heart of the observatory, a devastating wave of energy that fried every electronic system, shattered the specialized solar telescopes, and, most importantly, severed the quantum connection between the entity and its human vessels. Ward and the staff collapsed like puppets with cut strings, the unnatural light fading from their transformed bodies. The humming stopped, replaced by an eerie silence broken only by the crackle of destroyed equipment and the sobs of Ava as she knelt beside her sister's now still form. Evelyn's body lay peaceful, the patches of light fading from her skin, leaving only pale, normal flesh behind. Whatever consciousness had been Evelyn Pierce was gone, sacrificed in that final desperate mental battle to contain the entity long enough for the pulse to break its connection to Earth. In the void between worlds, in the heart of the sun itself, the entity raged at its defeat, at the severing of the bridge it had spent decades creating. But a fragment of something else remained with it now, a piece of human consciousness of Evelyn Pierce bound to it in that final confrontation, a fragment that would keep it contained, keep it occupied for centuries to come. 3 weeks later, the world had largely moved on from what scientists labelled a severe solar storm event. Communications had been restored, power grids repaired, and the strange behaviours reported during the peak of the event, were dismissed as mass hysteria triggered by fear and uncertainty. The Solaris Observatory, officially destroyed by an electrical fire, was being rebuilt with enhanced safety measures. The surviving staff members, including Professor Ward and Dr. Noah Campbell, had no memory of their actions during the event, a fact that brought both relief and lingering questions. Ava Pierce sat alone in her apartment, surrounded by her sister's research notes, journals, and personal effects. Unlike the others, she remembered everything: the entity, its influence, and Evelyn's sacrifice. The official story was that Dr. Evelyn Pierce had died heroically trying to save crucial research equipment during the fire. Only Ava knew the truth. Among Evelyn's papers, she had found a journal entry dated just days before the final confrontation, its contents chilling in their prescience. The sun is not what we think. It is not just a star. It is something older and far more dangerous. If you are reading this and I am gone, know that the battle may be won, but the war is not over. It will return patient and hungry as it has always been. Watch the sun. Always watch the sun. Ava closed the journal, a new determination settling over her. Her sister's work would not be forgotten, her sacrifice not in vain. Someone needed to keep watching, to remain vigilant. And who better than a journalist with direct experience of the threat? As she made her decision far above the Earth, a small, seemingly insignificant solar flare erupted from the surface of the sun, a brief pulse of energy that the new observatory systems failed to detect. Within that pulse, a whisper of consciousness reached toward Earth, weak but persistent. The entity was diminished but not destroyed. And it could wait. It had waited before, for millennia. Earth would still be there when it regained its strength, when it found a new Evelyn Pierce to serve as its bridge. But next time, it would be more careful. Next time, it would not underestimate the power of human connection, of human sacrifice. Next time, perhaps, it would succeed where it had failed before. And somewhere in the void between stars, a fragment of what had once been Evelyn Pierce continued its eternal vigil, watching, waiting, protecting, the human guardian of a cosmic secret, the keeper of the darkness within the light.